Populism. By popular demand, we start with populism, a political approach that frames politics as a struggle between ordinary people and a corrupt or out-of-touch elite. It is not a complete ideology on its own and can attach itself to the left, right, or center, relying heavily on emotional appeal, simplified messaging, and a strong us versus them narrative. In practice, leaders claim to speak for the people, while rarely defining who qualifies, and they promise sweeping solutions without much detail on how those solutions will work. The messaging comes off as vague, emotionally charged, and endlessly adaptable. A political personality quiz where everyone is told they're on the winning team. Policy becomes a vibes check, expertise becomes suspicious, and complexity is treated like a personal attack. It's governance by microphone. Loud, confident, deeply relatable, and followed by a long, awkward silence once the cheering fades and someone asks, "Okay, but how?" Libertarianism. If populism wants louder leaders, libertarianism wants fewer of them, preferably none within shouting distance. This political philosophy centers on maximizing individual liberty while minimizing the role of the state. It emphasizes private property, voluntary exchange, free markets, and minimal government intervention in both economic and personal life. In practice, this means government is viewed less as a necessary organizer and more as an intrusive roommate who keeps touching your stuff. Regulations are treated like personal insults, taxes like theft with extra paperwork, and public services like suspicious magic that should really be handled by the free market. The entire system runs on the belief that free individuals, making rational choices, will naturally create order. A worldview that works beautifully in theory and gets noticeably quieter the moment someone asks who fixes the roads, enforces contracts, or stops a billionaire from buying the fire department. Capitalism. If libertarianism wants the government out of the way, capitalism wants the market in charge. This is an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production, market competition, and profit incentives. Prices, wages, and investment decisions are largely determined by supply and demand, rather than centralized planning. In practice, it's extremely good at innovation, efficiency, and turning everything, including time, attention, and burnout, into a monetizable asset. It also runs on the assumption that growth must always go up, forever, in a world with finite people and resources, as well as a workforce that would like to sleep occasionally. Opportunity technically exists for everyone, but access varies wildly, and failure is framed as a personal flaw rather than a structural feature. Capitalism promises freedom of choice, and then spends billions convincing you exactly what to choose. Socialism. If capitalism measures success by profit and growth, socialism measures it by fairness and shared outcomes. This is an economic and political system advocating collective ownership of major industries and resources, either through public institutions or the state. It aims to reduce inequality, strengthen social safety nets, and limit the concentration of wealth and power. In practice, it starts with a very reasonable observation that extreme wealth inequality is unhinged, and then immediately triggers a collective panic about toothbrushes, incentives, and who's paying for this. Supporters frame it as fairness and shared responsibility, while critics hear the government is coming for your stuff and stop listening entirely. Every discussion becomes a theoretical tug-of-war between compassion and control, with everyone talking past each other while insisting they're the only one who understands how it really works. Communism. If socialism wants to rebalance the system, communism wants to rebuild it entirely. This is a theoretical economic and political system that aims to create a classless, stateless society where the means of production are collectively owned and resources are distributed based on need rather than market forces or profit. In practice, it starts as an elegant thought experiment and ends as a very intense group project. The promise is total equality. The reality tends to involve centralized control, rigid hierarchy, and a ruling class that insists it's only temporary. Every failure is blamed on not doing it correctly. Every criticism is treated as sabotage, and the ideal version is always just one more revolution away. It's the ideology that claims to eliminate power and then immediately concentrates it in the hands of people who swear they'll give it back later. Anarchism. If communism wants to eliminate class, anarchism wants to eliminate authority altogether. This political philosophy rejects centralized power structures and advocates for a stateless society organized through voluntary cooperation, mutual aid, and horizontal decision-making rather than enforced hierarchy. In practice, it's built on a radical level of trust in human behavior. The idea is that once authority disappears, people will naturally self-organize peacefully, share resources fairly, and resolve conflicts cooperatively, which is a beautiful vision. right up until someone ignores the rules, takes more than their share, or decides your lawn is now a communal art installation. Anarchism assumes the best in everyone, all the time, and quietly hopes no one ruins it for the rest of the group. Environmentalism. If anarchism questions who should rule, environmentalism asks whether any of it matters if the planet collapses. This ideology focuses on protecting natural ecosystems and managing human activity in a way that is environmentally sustainable over the long term. It emphasizes conservation, pollution reduction, renewable energy, and limiting ecological damage caused by industrial growth. In practice, this position has the uncomfortable job of pointing out that infinite growth on a finite planet might be a flawed business model. It tends to prioritize long-term survival over short-term profit, which is why it's often treated like the buzzkill at the economic party. The data is boring, the consequences are not, and the message somehow always sounds alarmist, despite being delivered by charts, graphs, and the occasional melting glacier. Environmentalism isn't trying to ruin anyone's lifestyle. It's just asking that future generations inherit something other than a cautionary tale. Conservatism. While environmentalism worries about tomorrow, conservatism is more concerned with what worked yesterday. This political philosophy prioritizes tradition, established institutions, cultural norms, and social stability. It favors gradual change over rapid reform and tends to view long-standing systems as valuable precisely because they've survived. In practice, this elevates the past to an authority it never asked to be. If something has been around long enough, it's automatically treated as wise, even when it was designed for a world without the internet, electricity, or basic rights for everyone. New ideas are met with the political equivalent of a deep sigh and let's not be hasty, no matter how obvious the problem is. Progress is fine, as long as it doesn't disrupt comfort, challenge power, or require admitting that tradition sometimes just means we never bothered to fix this. The worldview runs on nostalgia, selective memory, and the firm belief that change is dangerous, right up until it becomes unavoidable. Feminism. If conservatism focuses on preserving social structures, feminism focuses on questioning who those structures actually serve. This is a broad social and political movement focused on achieving gender equality by addressing systemic imbalances in rights, opportunities, and power. It advocates equal pay, legal equality, bodily autonomy, and freedom from discrimination. In practice, this somehow became one of the most controversial ideas on earth, despite boiling down to women should have the same rights as men. The word itself is now regularly used as an insult, shorthand for angry, dramatic, or asking for too much, which is impressive considering the actual demands haven't changed in decades. Critics often insist equality has already been achieved, while reacting with visible distress whenever it's tested in real life. Feminism keeps having to clarify that equality isn't a personal attack, a lifestyle threat, or a secret agenda. It's just a request to stop treating half the population like an optional upgrade. Separatism. If feminism challenges who holds power within a society, separatism asks whether that society should exist at all. This ideology advocates for the political independence of a specific group from an existing state, with the goal of forming a new sovereign entity. It is typically driven by perceived differences in culture, ethnicity, language, religion, or historical identity, and is often fueled by the belief that self-governance will better protect the group's interests than remaining within a larger political system. In practice, it's political divorce with a victory parade. Independence is sold as a clean reset, fewer problems, more freedom, instant control, right up until reality shows up with border disputes, economic negotiations, and the sudden realization that running a country is harder than running a movement. The rhetoric thrives on identity and grievance, promising unity while immediately splintering into arguments over leadership, legitimacy, and who gets to speak for the people now. Turns out, leaving the system doesn't exempt you from bureaucracy. It just means you have to build your own from scratch. Liberalism. After all the revolutions, rebellions, and restructurings, liberalism steps in, asking a quieter question. How do we protect individual rights no matter who's in charge? This political philosophy emphasizes individual rights, equality before the law, representative government, and protections for civil liberties such as free speech, press, and due process. It forms the foundation of most modern democratic systems. In practice, it's the operating system everyone runs while arguing about how it works. The rules matter deeply, but only when someone feels personally affected by them. Liberalism spends most of its time defending principles that feel invisible until they're threatened, at which point everyone suddenly becomes a constitutional expert. It's not flashy, it's not revolutionary, but it's doing an alarming amount of heavy lifting while being blamed for problems it was originally designed to prevent. If you have thoughts, questions, or strong opinions, the comments are open. Suggestions for future videos are always welcome. Otherwise, the next explanation is already queued up.